to come in, and then we're going to start for anybody who's already logged on. Yeah, wait a minute or two, and some of those beeps and buzzes will stop. All right, Karrie, do you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Well, everybody, welcome to Sound Girls webinar, which is strategies for a successful career in touring. How do I get on the road? And how do I get a touring gig? That's the million-dollar question. The road to concert touring is not a direct path. And if you ask 10 different people how they got their gig, you're probably going to hear 10 different stories. So once you actually find your way onto a tour, how do you stay there and then build a career out of it? Well, in this webinar, we've put together an A-list group of women who've navigated the music industry to achieve long and successful touring careers. And they're here to share their stories and their strategies, and most of all, their wisdom. Before we get started, I'm just going to ask that everyone keep their microphones muted, and if you can, just please save your questions for the end. Many of you have already sent questions ahead of time, and we've worked a lot of those into this discussion. But you can also send your questions via the chat, and we will do our best to make sure that we get to all of them. First of all, I would like to just briefly introduce everyone. If you guys could wave when I introduce you. Christina Moon started touring in 2006. She is the monitor engineer for Sleater Kinney and Mandy Moore. Christina has also worked for Beach House, LCD Sound System, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Death Cab for Cutie, Interpol, Cat Power, and others. Claudia Engelhart started touring in 1985, and Claudia has been the tour manager and front of house engineer for guitarist Bill Frisell for the past 30 years. She's also worked for Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, Roseanne Cash, Laurie Anderson, Grover Washington Jr., Medeski Martin and Wood, Michael Becker, and many more. Melissa Britton started touring in 2001. She is the front of house engineer for Dave Koz, who she's worked with since 2001. And Melissa has also worked with Al Jarreau, Dave Sanborn, Tower of Power, Kev Mo, Sheila E., James Ingram, Boney James, and other jazz greats. Melissa has also been the sound engineer for Jazz Cruises since 2005. Marguerite Nguyen started touring in 2000. She is the tour manager for Coldplay and K-pop sensation BTS, as well as Janet Jackson and Charlie Puth. In 2012, Marguerite was awarded both the Parnelli and TBI Award for Tour Manager of the Year. Becky Pell started touring in 1998, and she is the monitor engineer for Westlife. She's also worked for Anastasia, Take That, Il Divo, Mute, Kylie Minogue, Jennifer Lopez, Bill Wyman, War of the Worlds, and many more. Becky is also regularly in charge of monitors at the world's largest music festival in Glastonbury, UK. Tana Douglas, the first woman roadie. She did her first tour in 1976, and at 16 years old was AC/DC's first touring sound engineer. She's done everything from backline to sound and lights, production, and tour management. Tana has toured with Carlos Santana, The Who, Ozzy Osbourne, Elton John, INXS, Iggy Pop, Suzi Quatro, Neil Diamond, Status Quo, and many others. Finally, Karrie and myself are the founders of soundgirls.org. Karrie Keyes did her first tour in 1990, and for the past 30 years, she's been monitor engineer for Pearl Jam and Eddie Vedder. Karrie has also worked for Red Hot Chili Peppers, Sonic Youth, Fugazi, Neil Young, Soundgarden, and more. Earlier this year, Karrie received the Parnelli Audio Innovator Award. And I'm Michelle Sabolchick Pettinato. I did my first tour in 1992, and I'm front of house engineer for Elvis Costello. I've also worked for Styx, Melissa Etheridge, Goo Goo Dolls, Gwen Stefani, Janet Jackson, Kesha, Adam Lambert, Mr. Big, Indigo Girls, and many others. Welcome everyone, and thank you for taking your time to be here and share your knowledge. So I want to start by talking about the reality of the gig. There's a lot of misconceptions about life on the road and what touring with a band is actually like. And many people, as we know, think it's such a glamorous life and that you get to hang out with famous musicians all the time and live this really exciting and marvelous life, when in fact, the reality of the job is quite different. So let's start with each of you talking a little bit about what your job is really like and what your duties are. Claudia, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I do sound and I tour manage, so my job is pretty full on, and I'm the only person on the so-called crew, so it's just me doing everything. My day to day is pretty intense. It starts weeks ahead of time advancing shows before we even go on tour and putting together, dealing with all the travel and all the hotels and putting together the itineraries. And then we get out on the road, and then I'm getting the band, together for the gigs and, getting everybody on planes and all that. And then I actually get to do the gig, which is really the fun part for me, is what I really love to do, is be able to, um, you know, be on stage and set up the stage and get everybody going and get the sounds together. So that's basically in a small nutshell what I do. It's pretty full on all the time. When I'm on tour, it's pretty much nonstop because I'm responsible for pretty much everything except playing the music, and I'm trying to make it as easy and as comfortable as possible for the musicians so that they can just focus on their music and not have to worry about all this peripheral stuff that goes on day to day. So any questions, any needs they have, I'm trying to accommodate as much as possible, and be able to also, set up the stage, do the sound, get the mics together, do all that on top of it. So there's a lot going on in my world. It's pretty full on.
Yeah, especially wearing two hats.
Or
Um,
apps.
yeah, multiple hats. Marguerite, how about you? What's it like tour managing some of the biggest bands in the world?
Um, well, I think people think it's a pretty glamorous job. And while I'm very proud of what I do and I love it, I see a lot of concrete. I see my suitcase in hotel rooms. But basically, I just get a group of people from point A to point B, and whatever that entails in between, whether it's cars, planes, visas. But basically, my job is to deliver the artists or band or musicians to the production manager. And then during showtime is probably where I get the most amount of work done, is when I'm sitting back in my office and it's silent because everyone else is focused on the show. It's a long day, but I wouldn't trade it in for anything else.
Awesome. Tana, you had a variety of roles on tour. What was a typical day like for one of your jobs?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends what level you're at and what job title or hat, as we call it, you're wearing at the time. So, I mean, I always focused, my love was the production side of it. So whether it was, starting doing backline or, then evolving to do front of house sound or lighting or production and then logistics, I always liked the production side. I tried to stay away from the bands as much as possible. I take my hat off to tour managers because I don't want to babysit. That's not, I'm really there for the tech, the technology evolving was what kept me going, And so, yeah, really long hours, driving a team, no matter what department you're in, I would always end up being in charge of the team. So you have to, you have to know your boundaries, you have to know their boundaries, and, surround yourself with good people. And, don't ask someone to do something that you're not prepared to do yourself, and that way, you can just evolve through the industry and end up wherever you want to end up, really. You don't have to get stuck in one place, but it's all long hours and it's all hard work. So don't think there's an easy one. There isn't. Unless you do that line, of course, and then they're called the country club. So there's something to that.
Christina, how about you? What's a day in the life like for you?
Well, fortunately, I only wear one hat. So monitor engineer, and it's just waking up early. Most of all the advancing and everything is done before rehearsals, because now I'm at the level of, you know, carrying gear. So all of that stuff has been sorted out before. So whether there's a tech or not, we're up in the morning loading in and making sure everything's ready for sound check, and making sure in-ears or bringing out wedges happens, and working with backline on any issues that may have come up the night before for a show. And yeah, making sure that the artist, you know, for sound check, that anything that needed to be addressed is addressed, and then, you know, then it's showtime, and kind of triaging whatever may come up during that portion of the evening, and being a little bit of an emotional support animal sometimes, you know, holding hands and yeah, tear down, load the truck, and on to the next city.
Great. And Becky?
Like Christina, I'm a monitor engineer. And yeah, the whole thing starts well in advance of actually getting anywhere near a gig. We're communicating with the front of house engineer, the PA company that are supplying our equipment, with the musicians, and finding out exactly what everyone's requirements are so that we can fulfill those. And then there's obviously a rehearsal period. And when we get on the road, my job, the way I see it, is to give the musicians and band or artists the most comfortable environment I possibly can, so that they are kind of in their audio sitting room, in their happy space, and they can forget about any technicalities of sound and just get on with their job of giving the audience a great show.
Great. And finally, Melissa, you've done both front of house and monitors. You've kind of been back and forth a lot, right?
Yeah, that's right. For me, it just depends on what gig it is. So I do both. I do front of house. I started doing monitors for Dave when I very first started. So I did that for about 9 years. And then from there, just got jobs with other artists where it was like Claudia, where I'm doing basically everything, tour managing, you know, getting people on the plane, driving the van. And so it just depends on what it is. With Dave, we do a Christmas tour. So we have 2 buses and a truck. So we carry all our own gear. But in the summertime, he just does weekends. So it's like Thursday through Sunday, we'll go out, and all the dates are fly dates. So it's getting up really early. It's a lot of time traveling. So I think the best part about it is when we eventually get to do the show. That's when I feel like that we get paid to travel and put it all up and set it all up. But the show is like what we do for free.
Right. Yeah. I think for all of us, that's our favorite part of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk a little bit about paying your dues. All of us on this panel, everyone is a veteran touring pro at the top of their game. And at the beginning of the webinar, during the intros, I mentioned the year that each of us started touring. But getting on tour didn't happen overnight. There were a lot of years of hard work leading up to it, and also years of paying your dues, even after getting on that first tour. And I think some of us still feel like we're paying our dues depending on the typical tour. But I think, you know, we all kind of took some jobs prior to touring that maybe weren't exactly what we wanted, but they primed us for the opportunities that were to come and taught us skills that we didn't even know we needed. So I'd like to talk about what kind of gigs you did prior to getting on tour, and what you learned from those jobs that helped prepare you for your future roles. Marguerite, I want to start with you because I know you worked for a promoter prior to doing your first tour.
Yeah, my senior year in college, the first semester I interned for the rock station in my town because I thought that I was going to go into radio. And then the second semester, I interned for a concert promoter, and, you know, I had no idea that this could be a career, you know, and so it was just such an eye-opening experience for me. My senior year internships were so pivotal, but more or less what really I think really made my skills good was I waited tables and bartended when I was in college, and having those people skills and dealing with different situations. And you know, we're all still serving people, right? We're just not serving them food all the time. So yeah, I got a job offer from that promoter when I graduated. I worked for him for a couple of years, and just being in that environment really taught me my skill set. And also, I think being on the promoter side of things was really educational for me instead of just going straight into the touring aspect, you know. And there weren't many female tour managers back in the day. There still aren't today. And it was really educational for me. I would definitely do it again if I had to, you know, wouldn't
Right.
change.
Tana, what about you? How did you, I think AC/DC was one of your first tours, right? How did you end up with AC/DC?
Yeah, that was the second band I ever worked for. But before that, I was like running around a rainforest where clothing was optional. And I went to a festival, and there was a guy called Philippe Petit, who's a tightrope walker. And he'd been brought into the country to just perform as a cultural thing for this festival. And then they were mentioning they were going to go to Sydney, and he was going to do this commando type walk. I don't know if you know who Philippe Petit is. He's the guy who walked between the Twin Towers, the tightrope walker. And this was what he did before he did that. And so anyway, so I got fascinated by watching them rigging everything and setting everything up for him to perform at this festival. And so I followed them down. I went down with them. And without knowing it, I was becoming part of my first production. Even though it wasn't music, it was a production, because we put on this whole thing without permits or permission or anybody knowing we were doing it. Just sun came up and there's this guy walking across the harbour bridge on a tightrope, you know, so it was kind of a fascinating experience. And then shortly after that, I went to my first concert show, and someone placed me next to the front of house soundboard, and I was just so much more fascinated by what was going on there and what was going on behind the scenes, like watching people come up and hand off guitars and stuff, you know. And it was like, what is going on here? Who are all these people? And it was like, oh, they're the road crew. That's a roadie, you know. And it was like, this is what I want to do. So, and within 2 weeks, I was actually doing someone's back line. So it was kind of interesting, really. And then I traveled down to Melbourne. So it's different for everyone. You know, I was fascinated by it. It didn't occur to me that I wanted to do that for a living, but I was just so curious and fascinated that I just jumped in.
Right.
And I'm still there. They didn't tell me that there's no exit. But anyway, but yeah, so, you know, I think it's got to be a love for music that really deep down sucks all of us in, you know?
Yeah. Melissa, how about you? You started out, you were at a small sound company in Colorado, right?
Yeah, it was Dallin Sound. It was a regional sound company in Denver, and I learned a lot. It's like I knew I wanted to mix, but they're like, if you want to mix, first you have to tech, and then if you want to tech, first you have to drive the truck, and then you have to load the truck. So it was like I was doing everything just to get to that point, but along the way I learned a ton of stuff. Like my first sound company was probably one of the best and most educational things that I did when I was first starting out, along with doing the club stuff on the side too, or on the weekends. It was, it taught me how to deal with people, how to deal with other artist engineers, how to deal with club owners, promoters. It taught me how to not talk when you're not supposed to talk, and stay out of the way, you know, and kind of just observe and watch what people that I respected and were doing really well, just watching what they were doing so I could learn to be more like them.
Yeah, lots of really useful skills. How about you, Becky?
Well, before I got a foot in the door of the industry, I was working in a pub, helped put myself through college, and that taught me what I thought were long days at the time of 14 hours on my feet, little realizing that would actually turn out to be quite a short day of being on my feet, but it kind of prepared me in that way, and dealing with people and, you know, dealing sometimes with difficult customers and keeping your cool definitely served me later on doing monitors. And then I got a job with a PA company in London who were advertising for an engineer, and I knew I was completely underqualified, but they gave me a chance anyway as the kid, basically, as the apprentice. And I went in, you know, I'd done a college course and went in there thinking I knew quite a bit, and I'll probably be mixing some gigs soon. And then within about 20 minutes, realised I knew absolutely nothing. And started sweeping a lot of floors, cleaning a lot of cables, loading trucks, driving vans. And, you know, gradually started to get my hands on little bits of gear and be given little bits more responsibility. And learnt my craft from the ground up, really valuable grounding. And it would be very long hours in the summer. You know, summer season, we'd easily do 100-hour weeks for 3 months at a stretch with no days off, and that was normal. And it taught me stamina and having a good attitude and just getting on with it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Christina, what were you doing before you started touring?
Before I started touring, it started interning in clubs around town and a few different recording studios because I wasn't really sure which avenue, if I wanted to be a live engineer or recording engineer like most. But I quickly realized that I didn't have the patience to be in the studio. I definitely like, you know, the chaos of a stage much more. So then I would do anything. I would, you know, sign up to be a stagehand while continuing doing studio work, and then becoming the full-time engineer at a club in town, which was great for kind of being thrown into the fire and getting more comfortable in my mixing. But like Melissa, I eventually started working for a local audio company in Seattle, and I really feel like that was a great foundation for me of learning, you know, getting my more technical skills fine-tuned, you know, from patching to, you know, all of those things that seem so simple and overlooked now, but can really, you know, take a show down in the middle of, you know, and things really get heated out there. So I definitely learned a lot about being organized and how to, you know, get through the day time-wise and how to triage situations and working from local crew to the touring crew and all of those things encompassed.
Right. Like a lot of troubleshooting, right? Yeah.
A lot of troubleshooting that even as you know, when you get further on in your career and you have techs, you still need to be able to head that process of getting through everything, because it's always going to be something.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Claudia, you worked at CBGB's, the Knitting Factory, you know, some really iconic clubs back in the day.
I mean, I was lucky growing up. Amongst my father is a jazz musician, and my sisters, we all played music. So I grew up in music all around us. And because my dad he's an artist and he made metal percussion instruments, a lot of musicians would end up in our house when they were playing in town. A lot of jazz musicians and Brazilian musicians and stuff. So I was surrounded by that from my whole life. When I was like 9 or 10, I knew I wanted to be on the road. It was sort of this romantic vision, but I knew it was going to happen somehow. So when I first decided to do sound, because I didn't go to college, it just sort of came to me. I started working in a local jazz club in San Francisco called Keystone Corner, which was where we grew up going as kids. It was all ages club, and thank God for that, because we were able to go hear music and hear the greats of jazz growing up, like in the 60s, 70s. We were really lucky. So when I moved to New York, when I do sound, I started working at Keystone because they gave me a night. The sound guy used to let us as little kids sit up in the sound booth so we could watch the show. And so as soon as I realized I wanted to do sound, I called him up and he said, yeah, he gave me Monday nights. I didn't know anything. I just went in there, but I knew music, and I knew about music, and I knew about musicians, and I knew how to communicate with musicians. It was just sort of this natural place. So when Keystone closed, I moved to New York, and then I worked at CB's. It was a gig, I did like 7 bands a night. I did audition nights, 7 bands a night. Some of the worst, horrible garage bands you've ever heard out of New Jersey would come and play. But it was the perfect place because you could just do anything, and you could screw around with anything sonically and figure it out. It was like school, I could play as much as I wanted in there, and nobody cared because they were just these bands that just wanted to be in CB's, And I eventually moved on to other clubs. I ended up working at SOB's, which at the time was the world music venue in New York. And I had, you know, like 4 nights a week there, playing with some of the greatest, I mean, my heroes of people that I grew up listening to and music that I loved. So it was my natural place. I was really, it was a lucky thing. I mean, I was mixing the whole time. I'm really low tech. I don't know anything about technology, you know, but it was all about the music for me. And it was all about being able to be around these people and learning from them and helping them be able to create the music that they created. So that's where I began before I started touring, was, you know, doing that.
Yeah. Like everyone's had such varied, you know, different paths to get in. What advice would you guys give to someone who's trying to break into touring now, and how to get their foot in the door, so to speak? Anybody? Tana.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, I mean, I was working for a very young AC/DC, but there was no doubt they were going to be huge. But I actually left that job and went and worked for a production company because I could learn more. I had no one to teach me with AC/DC because I was doing their front of house sound, and we were always doing like 12 shows a week and stuff. So there was no time and there was no one to learn from. So I actually walked away from that and went with a production company, which was an international, all we did was the international tours that came into the country. So it was really owned by the promoter down there. But that to me was something that I needed to do, because I just think if you're working with a production company, you're working with some really talented and versatile skill sets. These people work from different bands all across the spheres, you know, all the different genres. So you can learn so much, and the equipment changes all the time, and it's always different. You've got to configure it differently. And it's just, to me, it's just a great way to learn. I mean, that to me was the natural go-to. And when I changed countries, I did it again. I went to a production company. Plus, it's kind of safe because once you get in there, you've got a job. So that's
Right.
good.
Right. Marguerite, what would you recommend if someone wanted to do what you do, to be a tour manager? What would you say was the best way to get some experience and get their foot in the door? You're muted.
I would say, yeah, to continue on that path of learning, like do every job that you can conceivably get, you know, like if you're going to intern somewhere, when you're finished doing your task, like look to your left and your right, and whatever your coworkers or your colleagues or your friends are doing, like figure it out. Just be like, hey, I want to learn how to do that. How do you do that? And then through that process, you'll really learn what you like and what you want to go into and further your education with, you know. And if you can get your foot in the door with a promoter or with a local club or a local production company or a sound or a lighting company, or, you know, like the more you learn, the better you'll be in any sort of capacity in life, in the field that you work, you know. Just don't stop. And also you should be kind and be eager to learn, you know. Being kind puts you so much further. Nobody wants to work with someone with a bad attitude, you know. And so the nicer you can be and the more humble you can be and the more helpful, I think that really goes a long way. People remember that stuff, you know. So I think that's what's really important to further yourself in any sort of business.
Does anybody else want to add anything for advice on getting your foot in the door, getting started?
I just think, yeah, get involved with as many things as possible. You never know who you're going to meet in any situation. You know, my first tour came from a booking agent. You know, I had already moved on, you know, a couple years at that point, and she threw my name in a hat for something. And that was my first tour with Yeah Yeah Yeahs. So you just never know where you're going to meet the person that might have the next opportunity for you. And all of those skills kind of compile into, you know, who you'll become. So do as much as you can when you can.
Yeah. I think it's important too, you know, if you live in an area where there's a venue where touring bands come through, or there's a good live music scene, you know, hang out with musicians, get to know the musicians, you know, get to know the people in that scene, because that's where the jobs come from. You know, production companies are great. If you can get a job at a venue that touring bands come through, you know, you'll meet a lot of contacts of potential employers, you know, potential people who will hire you in the future. Like Marguerite said, you know, just be nice and be kind and make sure everybody knows that, hey, I want to get on tour, you know, here's my info, how, you know, if you ever need anybody, here's what I've done. Speaking of that, what can you do to best prepare for a touring gig? You know, if that's your goal, what are some of the things you should be doing to really prepare to do a good job when you get on tour? Becky?
I think I would have to agree with the previous question, really. Say yes a lot, say yes to all the opportunities, and don't be picky, especially early on in your career, because you never know who you're going to meet, you never know where things are going to lead. And generally, the worst, most uncomfortable, most difficult gigs are the ones that you learn the most from. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's all great when everything's going smoothly, but actually it's the really tricky ones that you get to be better at your job. I mean, I always wanted to tour, and I was very lucky to get a grounding with 5 years with a PA company that they weren't really a touring company, but it was a pathway, and I got such a fantastic foundation with them. I did all sorts of stuff with them, you know, TV, town planning meetings, royal banquets, ship launches, conferences, you know, all sorts of events that weren't touring, but it all taught me the craft. And, you know, it was actually through the TV work that I learned how to do monitors, and that set me up for when I did decide to go freelance and step into touring world. So yeah, say yes to everything and just keep an open mind and keep learning.
Yeah. Anybody else? Tana?
I think also it goes beyond just learning. I think you've got to learn it, but you've got to learn why you do something. Because, like, for example, if you're in a venue and you're only working in that venue and you only set it up this way, if all of a sudden you get put out on the road, it's going to change every day. And if you don't know why you're doing something, it makes it more difficult for you to preempt those changes and accommodate for them and actually make space for them. So I think a lot of people learn things by rote, and they don't really know why they're doing it that way, or why exactly something's set that way, whether it's equalizers or equipment or stacks of PA or whatever it is, you know, but learn as much as you can and just ask questions, you know, because it's going to shift. I mean, the whole difference with touring is it's a movable feast. Every day you can expect something different, you know, and there will be something different. And if you can't move with that and flow with that and accept that, it's going to be harder for you. So just learn why you do something a certain way or why something's asked of you, you know? I think that's a good idea.
Good points. Let's talk about the realistic expectations of touring. Now, I know when I got my first tour, I just assumed I made it, and now tours would just keep coming and coming, but they didn't. And I learned really fast that I had to hustle for every gig. I had to do that for a long time until I had built up enough of a reputation where people knew me and knew the quality of work. It's not the kind of job where you just send out a bunch of resumes and wait for someone to call you even after you get your first tour. So where do your gigs come from? Melissa, how do you get your gigs?
Now or when I started?
Well, when you started and after you built up a reputation, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it while Claudia was talking. It's well, I was working at a club before I started working for the sound company, and what we would do, there were two of us that really wanted to learn. So we would get paid every other week to work on Sundays. So he would get paid one Sunday, I'd get paid the next Sunday, and we do 3 bands for $3. So basically, we ran the show, did the changeovers and stuff like that, and that's kind of what helped lead me into working with the sound company, just meeting people through the club. And but as far as like skill set, or I think you have to be really adaptable. Like you have to be able to do, like Marguerite said, you know, look at your peers and the other people you're working around, see what they're doing, learn from them. You have to be willing to work really hard. It's not easy. It's great, and it's an incredibly rewarding job to have, but it is not easy. I mean, it's a lot of long days. I think what's really important is networking and people skills, even musical skills. Like Claudia said, she understood music. So what I did was I forced myself to learn a little bit of something on every instrument. So if I'm the only person there and I'm setting up the monitors, I can play everything enough to get through a sound check, or, you know, to get the guys close to where they needed to be before I got to front of house, if that was a situation. But having really great intuition and having good court vision, those are other two things that I think is really important, especially when you're doing monitors, if that's what you want to do. It's intuition is key. It's like you have to be able to know what they're thinking before they think it and make the move to fix whatever the problem may be, or something like that. Being able to read people is also very important. Yeah, just like, I guess if you're doing a gig, no matter what it is, act as if you are the owner of that gig and not the employee. Like, take a lot of pride in what you do. I guess that would be helpful.
Great. Christina, so where do your gigs come from? How do you make the connections? Who hires you? Is it a tour manager, production manager, or the sound company? And what are some of the skills that you think are beneficial for the job?
I would say most of my jobs come from recommendations from fellow crew members. Someone will be heading out on a different tour, something's wrapping up, and one of the backline guys will be, will recommend me, or a fellow audio person. So I feel like most of my gigs come from that. So who actually hires me can vary between band management to the tour manager. But yeah, typically I guess tour managers to band managers, but usually it seems like a lot of recommendation happens when it comes time for a tour to get started. And so that is how that works for me best. But then the skills for that, you definitely have to have the people skills and be able to work in a team setting. And, as Marguerite was saying, be kind and be someone that people want to be around and have, because you're going to be living, you spend more time with your road family than you do with your own family. So I think being able to be in that kind of setting and get along with everyone is a huge key part of that. And then we'll keep getting you asked back. Like, obviously being good at your job is a huge part of it, but the other big aspect of it is being able to be around in tight quarters a bunch of other people.
Yeah. Well, especially for you, Claudia. I mean, you do the front of house, tour management, backline, and it's a small group that you guys travel with when you're with Bill, and all the other jazz legends that you've worked with. I'm guessing that kind of came through your work with Bill, that you've made connections with these people as well, or it's...
Yeah, even before that, I mean, I met Bill through another band that he was playing in that I happened to be doing sound for, and we all connected. Like, when I first started touring, I hadn't even met Bill. I was doing salsa gigs and stuff, but it was about a couple of things. I speak languages, and that was really helpful. I speak Spanish and Portuguese fluently. I got lots of gigs early on in the very beginnings because I spoke Spanish and Portuguese, and I would do like these big, huge Latin festivals. Just language skills alone was a huge in for me. Besides the fact that I knew about music, and the people that were hiring me for those kinds of gigs knew that I understood what the music was about, and I was passionate about the music. But for me, the gigs have come mainly through musicians and people recommending me from, other musicians recommending me to other musicians like that. It's been more word of mouth, I think, because I understand with the music that I've been working with. I understand the music really well. It's part of me. I consider myself, I am a musician, even if I'm mixing the sound and I'm not really playing on stage. I'm playing, and I'm playing with them as much as anybody, because I'm interpreting what they're giving me, and it's intimate, and especially in acoustic music and in jazz, which is my main focus. It's really interactive. Like, we're communicating constantly. What I do out in front is affecting what they're doing on stage, or any aspect of the job that I'm doing. You know, how our day goes, their day is going to go too. So we're all, you know, we're all working really close. It's very intimate. And I think having a good demeanor and being around other people and enjoying the people you're around, I definitely find it. I have to work with people that I love. I don't want to be around people that I don't like. I don't want to be around music that I don't like. I'm spoiled that way. I've been able to do that. I've been able to work with people that I really love to be around. And so it gives me the want to make it better. So I think that word gets out, and I think a lot of musicians know about that too. And I think that's how I've been getting my gigs lined up over the years. Has a lot to do with that, besides my musical knowledge. You know?
So the language thing is really interesting. It's kind of like, you know, you have to look at it that since it's not a traditional field and there's so many people fighting for the same jobs, what do you have that can really set you apart from somebody else that gives you that little bit of an edge, you know? And that's something I would have never even thought about.
Yeah, that was a big game changer for me in a lot of ways. It really opened a lot of doors just because I could speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Becky, you've done a really big variety of styles of music as well. So does that come from production managers hiring you, or a sound company, or the artists themselves?
It's usually production managers that get in contact with me to do a gig. Although a lot of times a production manager or tour manager might speak to the project manager of the PA company they're going to use and say, hey, we've got a space for this, and you know, we need a monitor engineer, who could you recommend? So quite a few times that's happened as well. And actually quite a few of my major artists have come about because I've asked myself. You know, I've kept in touch with people and found out that a particular production manager or PA company is doing this tour, and I've actually got in touch and said, hey, if there's a position for a monitor engineer on that, I'd really like to do it. And a couple of my major artists have come about because I've asked, basically. Yeah, so yeah, production managers, PA companies, and yeah, don't be scared to ask if there's something that you see that you would like a crack at, because even if that particular position isn't available, there might be another position, you know, on the tour for you. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Marguerite, now as a tour manager, do you get hired by management, or how do you get hired?
Same as everyone, all spectrums, right? It's really word of mouth and who you make a good impression on. I've had front of house engineers recommend me for jobs. I've had other tour managers, other production managers, management, and as Becky mentioned, I've gone hunting as well. You know, like if you hear someone's looking for a tour manager or whatever, and then in the case that, you know, you're in a position where you're just looking, period, I never do a mass email to everyone, to all my friends and contacts that I'm looking. I normally like pick like an agent here and a manager over here. And I try to hit every spectrum of people I've met, or if I haven't spoken to somebody in a long time, I want to remind them I'm available. Because sometimes if you're, and I'm sure everyone gets to that, when you're with someone for a really long time, which is what all of our goals are, right? We want to just be with that one artist for a very long time. Sometimes it pigeonholes you and people forget about you, and people don't think that, hey, maybe that person's recording an album and on a break or whatever, you know, or taking a hiatus and you need to work in that time. So I think you just need to be open to anything. And like, you never know, you know, who's going to recommend you for a job. It should just be that one person in that room where you make an impression on, and they'll remember who you are.
Right. And as a tour manager, you sometimes are in charge of hiring people. So what do you look for in a crew person?
I would say the number one thing is their attitude, their personality, their friendliness, how they get along with someone. You know, I would definitely pick someone who was friendly and had a great attitude, and their skill set is like not as high as that. Not that I don't think skill set is important, because obviously skill set is important, but you know, there have been many times where resumes have come across my desk or in my emails, and I'm just like, oh, that person was really mean, or not even mean to me, but like mean to someone I know. And obviously I only want to treat people how they've treated me, but you know, like if they have a reputation for being mean to stagehands, I don't want that person on my team, you know? So yeah.
So what does the first tour look like? So if you guys can remember back to your first tour, you know, if someone is just out there really plugging away, trying to get on tour, what should they expect for their first tour? You know, it's not usually not going to be the best bus, you know, and bunks, you know, that are the condo bunks, 6 people to a bus. It might be a van tour. It might be 12 people in a bus. What do you recall as your first tour looking like? Claudia, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Melissa.
I was gonna say, it'll be really quick. Well, I didn't have really any expectations. When I went on my very first tour, my boss from the sound company hired the bus company, and I thought that all buses didn't have running water or satellite or heat, and we were touring in the winter. So I was like, oh, this must be how it is. This is what touring's like. No heat, no water, and no satellite TV. That's all.
I got to jump in. It's a nightmare. It was before bands had buses, and then all of a sudden we get news from the management company, we've bought a bus. It's like, oh wow, how cool is this? And then it arrived. It was it was horrible. It was a nightmare. It had the hard seats, like not even for like overnight trips. It was like a short day trip bus. It was one of the buses they used to take passengers from the terminal to the plane in those days. You know what I mean? And then they just cut it in half and threw all the gear in the back. It broke down. It didn't work when it was supposed to work. It was like freezing. It was just a nightmare. So, you know, if you're starting out now, and you've got a small van tour, relish it, because it's got to be better than it used to be. You know? Anything's got to be better. So it's not going to be flash to start with, you know, and you've got to really hang in there, you know, because you're going to have moments where you go, oh my God, what have I done? You know, but that's not why you're there to be in a bus. You're there to actually do the show, and if you love the show, hang in there, because it will get better. It will get better.
Anybody else want to recall their first tour? No?
Yeah, best forgotten usually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even, you know, for those of us who did those van tour days, and then you got onto a bus, and then, you know, sometimes you're flying from city to city. Yeah, I think there's a misconception that, oh, once you get to arena level touring, that you never go back to clubs. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions that you just keep going up in level. But I think the reality is that, you know, you do whatever your artist is doing. And I know I've worked for artists that one day we're doing an arena tour, the next, you know, an arena show, the next day it's a theater, the next day it's a private gig in a, you know, 100-seat club. So there is kind of no just onward and upward path. I think for most of us, I think we've all kind of bounced around a lot of it, you know. Did anybody else have any big misconceptions about touring when they started, of what, you know, your expectations were to what you actually were presented with?
Yeah, no, I didn't really have any expectations. I didn't know what to expect. You know, you see bands roll through when you're working for a local audio company, and so yeah, it felt as expected, I guess.
Right.
But no big surprises.
It's probably better to not have expectations, because then
Yeah.
it's just going to be good.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Be pleasantly surprised rather than disappointed.
Right.
So is it a good idea to have more than one skill set when you're starting out? You know, should you have a couple different tools under your belt, or should you just focus on one job? What's your guys' opinion on that?
Well, I could talk about that for days. Because that's kind of what I do. I do everything, you know. I think it is important. I think it's good to know all the different aspects. You don't have to be the top at every single part of what it is, but it's good to know. It's good to know what goes on around because eventually you might have to do it. You know, somebody might get sick or you might be just put in that position. I mean, the one thing about what we all do is I think there's a certain amount of flexibility that you have to have and willingness to try anything to make a show happen. Because, you know, the show must go on and you want it to go on and you want it to be as good as it can possibly be. So I think it takes a lot of different things that you can do to make it happen. And if you have to help somebody, you know, load a truck, or if you have to be the person that's, you know, running around plugging things in on stage, or whatever it is that it takes, it's you know, it's part of the deal. I think that's you can't be just one thing, I don't think, in the business that we're in, because I think you would get really, it's not realistic, really, in live sound. Maybe in a studio it's different because you can be really set in one place, but when you're doing live and it's different every day, and I mean, you might have to drive the van one day and the next day you might be checking people in at the airport, or you might be the one setting up the back line or running monitors, and the next day you're running front of house. I mean, I think that's, you have to be, I think being open-minded and being willing to do it, you want to be enthusiastic. I mean, you got to love what you're doing, really, and really show that, and be a team player, because I think that's really, really important, to be able to do that. I think it gets you far in any kind of job situation. It doesn't even have to be in audio. It's anywhere, really. If you're, you know, willing to do anything to make something good, then what's not to like, you know?
Right.
Melissa, you've worn a couple different hats as well, and especially with the jazz cruises. I'm sure that's got to be a handful. How has having more than one skill set helped you with continuing to work and getting more jobs?
I guess for me, it's mostly that I've always been willing to do whatever it takes. I love loading trucks. Like, I love loading trucks. People, not everybody likes loading trucks, but it's that attitude, I think, that helps to, like, I'll do whatever, because it's so, when I'm mixing, it's so satisfying. It's like this, I always get this feeling like when everything is just right, and the band is on and everything sounds great, and it's just like this overwhelming feeling of like, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing at this point in time right now. And you're just totally immersed in it. And so whatever it takes, I would do whatever it took to have that feeling consistently. Like, the jazz cruises they're long. Like, I think the longest we did was 42 days in a row with 0 days off, and they're at the least 12-hour days. So you go 12 to 16 to 18-hour days ish the whole time, and it's like constant music. There's constant rehearsals, and then there's shows, like 2 and 3 shows a night, or 4 shows. It just depends, but it's a lot, and it gets hard. But I just remind myself that this is what I wanted to do, and I love it. So it's great.
Nice. And Christina, how about you?
Excuse me. I have pretty much stuck to audio only while touring. Definitely willing to jump in, you know, when someone needs help, you know, running around taking lunch orders if someone's busy, to loading the truck. But I've kind of always tried to avoid the double duty of, you know, TM audio, excuse me, or PM, just because I like to be away from my computer. And so I like, when my job's done, I'm done for the day. Whereas, you know, my friends in the office tend to, you know, have to be on all the time. So I try to keep it to the one job at a time for myself.
Okay. And Tana, you've done everything. So you clearly have a lot of different skill sets, and I'm sure that's kind of helped propel you through, you know, decades of a really lengthy, successful career.
Yeah, I think it's important that even if you don't try a different position, you at least understand it. You know, you can be a much better member of the big picture crew as opposed to your own little crew, if you understand why the crew that's coming in behind you keeps yelling at you to say, get this stuff off, get it up in the air, or get it out of here, or whatever. It's, you know, you don't want to be that person who's holding up everybody. So if you have a basic understanding of what they have to do to make their job complete, then I think you've become a better member of a crew, you know. And I think that's really important, that you understand each other's positions, you know. And I always made a point of just jumping in and doing it, you know, because again, I mean, I spent 30 years being a sponge. I just wanted to learn as much as I could about all of it. And, you know, I guess the job I didn't do that I wanted to do was production manager. And I went off in a different course at the last moment. So I never got to do that. But why I was learning all these different departments was because that's what I wanted to do, because there were no women production managers. I don't know how many there are now, but there's not many. But it was probably one of the last frontiers, next to probably tour management, that got broken down, you know. And because it's such a, you know, it's equipment orientated more than band orientated, I think it was kind of the last bastion that they weren't sure that they all wanted to be bossed around by a woman. I think that was their fear. But anyway, I think the more you learn about each department, and also like when I changed countries, when I left Australia and went to England, I'd been doing lighting by that point, but the first job I got in England, which I really needed, I was getting hungry, was doing backline again. So, you know, it just opens up more doors from you. And from that backline gig, I got hooked up with a production company. So, you know, I think the more you can do and the more versatile you are, the more that you're going to have as a stockpile of knowledge, and that can never be bad. You know?
Yeah. And Becky, you've got some very different skills. Along with audio, you're also a yogi, and you teach yoga on the road, right?
Yeah, I do. I was about to say that I'm kind of a one-trick pony when it comes to audio. I've covered all the bases and can do the various jobs, but I specialised in monitors. But yeah, I do something completely different on the road as well, which is teaching yoga to bands and artists, generally after sound check. It kind of happened by accident. My love of yoga was well known, and a production manager asked me if I would teach her, and I said, you know, I hadn't done my training yet, but I was happy to show her a few things, and that sort of sparked me to go and do my training. And then the next band I was with discovered I'd done my training and said, oh, would you give us a class after sound check? And it kind of grew from there, and I've toured on pretty much every tour I've done in the last probably 8 years. So yeah, so it's a nice yin and yang to the day.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So what kind of business skills and knowledge should you have? Marguerite, this is probably more something for you to answer as a tour manager. You know, what kind of business background, or do you do a lot of accounting as a tour manager? In settlements, how much of that stuff are you actually responsible for?
Oh my God, that's probably my least liked part about my job, is the accounting and settlement. I can do it. I would never want to settle, you know. I mean, I've settled arena shows, but I don't think I could ever just go out as a tour accountant, just because I think the whole part of touring and your job is to like it. And no offense to any accountants, because I have many great friend accountants, but I mean, I guess the only business background I really have is, again, the waiting tables and the bartending, you know, and that sort of accounting. I don't know if being Asian and good in math has anything to do with it as well, but I mean, I love spreadsheets. I can, you know, if you guys talk about how much your love of music and stuff like that, I mean, I love music too, but I love a good spreadsheet, you know. So I have really used that to my benefit. But yeah, I always talk about, you know, maybe I should go back and take a CPA course or do something else different in my field that will propel me. But I also think learning a different task doesn't necessarily mean you have to use that task for a job. Like, I was on a tour, I was doing meet and greets, I was done by 6 p.m. and I was like, what else can I do? And I ended up, you know, putting up and breaking down the wardrobe tent on the side of the stage and helping the dancers change during the show, which was fun for me because I'm normally never a part of the show, you know, like I'm always sitting in my office or doing something. So I never went on to do wardrobe, again, not my forte, but like I learned something and it was cool to, you know, and it showed the production manager and the tour manager at the time that I was, you know, I wanted to help out, which helped me get another job in the future. So, yeah.
Great. Now here's a question from someone who had asked if any of you have any document outlines of info sheets that you need on tour, whether it's like a schedule or daily costs, overall touring costs, how much, I mean, probably Claudia and Marguerite, you guys use a lot of that stuff for travel and, you know, call times, things like that. But what other kind of info would be good? Like obviously input lists and stage plots are, you know, writers, tech specs, that kind of thing. What else do you guys use on a regular basis?
I'm pretty low tech, but I mean, I work on a pretty small scale too. So it's sort of my own, it's sort of for me, you know, all the notes and all the stuff that I need to keep track of. I mean, there's management who helps me, you know, get a lot of questions answered and stuff, but I'm kind of, most of it's really just for my own benefit to keep track of what's going on and stay organized. Being organized, I think, is 99.9% of being a tour manager, you know, and staying just on top of stuff. But I don't have any, like, I don't have any particular, like, special document. I have, you know, my rider is really important. I really think keeping that up to date and keeping it really specific as possible is huge. I mean, every year I go through all my riders and I update them. I talk to all the musicians and make sure they get, because they want to be able to play through the gear that they like, or as much as possible, you know. So I try to do the best I can to get that organized, and so I can advance it to give them what they need to play through. Riders are really important. And I make itineraries, and I think the itinerary, it's really time consuming to make, but it's important. Nobody ever reads the stupid thing. That's the only problem. But it's you know, so everybody, at least they know where they're going. And if you have clear, straight information, not too much information, but just enough so everybody knows where they are and what to do, where to go, then, you know, that's really important. I think those things are important. I don't know, Marguerite, you probably have more fancier stuff than I do.
Well, I have yet to master tour. I know that seems to be like the next wave of thing that everybody uses, and I just haven't been able to really wrap my head around it. Not that I'm willing not to learn that skill set, but I have, you know, my day sheet is 15 years in the making. I love that thing. And I don't share that I don't really share my documents with other people, just because it's pretty detailed, and to me, it's my proprietary information. I'm not trying to be selfish, not that I don't want to share the wealth, but it's been like years of like, okay, this works and that works. And so, yeah, I mean, I think documents are super important. And I'm a big proponent of learning Microsoft Word and Excel, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
like a typing course. Like, thank God when I was in middle school, I took a keyboarding class. So I really encourage everyone to be able to type without looking at looking at a keyboard. I think that's really advantageous to everybody. That's an important skill that everybody should learn, being able to type without looking at your keyboard.
Let's talk about the logistics of touring. So when you get hired for a tour, you know, what are some of the things that someone who's new to touring should think about for their negotiations? Things like, you know, how to get paid, hotel rooms, how, you know, what are things they should look out for when they're negotiating? Christina?
Yeah, that one's tough. I still struggle with my negotiation skills. I wish I were stronger and better at that. I keep telling myself I'm going to read one of those books on better negotiating. Because as soon as money comes up, I want it to be over, which is really not a great way to feel about it. So, I kind of have a set rate that I'm comfortable leaving the house with, and you just kind of have to have your bottom line and also know what level where the band is at as well. Sometimes for, people I like, I'll leave the house for a little less money than I typically would.
Mhm.
But, small things that now have come up with when I sometimes go out of the genre of music that I work for have come up, do you pay for travel days? Because I didn't even realize that some people don't want to do that or pay half pay for that. So, understanding, as a weekly rate, what your per diem is, are you sharing a room or not? Those are big things for me because everything's pretty loose, at least when I'm negotiating with managers or tour managers. It's all done in emails or a phone conversation. So I kind of just try to have a little list of what my bottom lines are before walking into that. But yeah, it's still a skill set that I wish I was better and more comfortable with. So I would be curious to hear if anyone else has any, great
Yeah.
tips.
Anna?
You can always start with what they're offering. What are you guys offering?
Yeah.
But then you've got to be realistic. What do you need?
Mhm.
And do you need the experience or do you need the money? Because that affects it
Right.
as well. But don't ever, take way under what you're worth. You know what I mean? And don't take less than other people just because you really want to be, say you did that tour. Because that means they're not appreciating you. They're just filling a hole. So to
Yes.
me, to me, I mean, I when you start out, you're lucky if you get paid at all, for God's sake, but if you learn and people are asking you to do the job, once it goes from you asking them if you can to them asking you if you will, then you've got some sort of, you've got a foot in the door there and you've got a value, or they wouldn't be asking you. So I think you have to realize that. Someone said to me quite a while back, said, how much do you want to do this job? And I gave them a number because, the per diems were covered, all the travel was covered, there was a holiday covered, there was all sorts of stuff. And I really wasn't, I thought, it'd be cool to do this. And the guy turned around and looked at me and he said, if that's all you think you're worth, how do you think someone else is going to think you're worth more? And I went, oh shit. It was a real eye-opener because it was a good figure, but they were prepared to offer me so much more. Did they? We met somewhere in the middle. So, I stuck my foot in it there. But that's what you've got to realize. You have a worth, you have a value. So don't, don't underrate yourself.
Yeah, especially when you're starting out, because you're just so happy to be offered something that,
Yeah, and people do take advantage of that. It's like,
Yes.
it's like, oh, well, this person's fun to have, and God, we don't have to pay him, or we only have to pay him, they do it cheap, whatever. Well, that's great, but you know what? You've got to be respected as well, So be careful with that. Don't be too keen to throw yourself out there for nothing. In the beginning, you're going to have to do something similar to that. I'm not saying work for free. I don't know what the base is anymore, but but never undervalue yourself. You have a value whether you feel you do or not.
Yeah, I think it's important to know like what is your monthly the amount that you need to survive, so at least your bottom line. And especially when you're trying to get that first tour, you're probably going to have to take, a really low paying gig but as long as it's enough that you can survive on, once you get that first tour under your belt and you do well, then you can renegotiate, just to get your foot in the door. I know my first tour, I had no idea what to ask for. And they said, we're paying this. I said, okay. And, 6 weeks later, the band was like, we love you. I'm like, great, I want more money, because I found out what everybody else was making. And I'm like, okay, well, but I earned it. I got to that point where they were really happy with me. And then I, renegotiated with management for a little bit of a raise, and they knew my value. I was also lucky enough a couple years into touring to have someone much older and wiser than me tell me that I was undervaluing myself, that my rate was way much, it was way too low for what it should have been, which I had no idea. Cause I think it's one of those things that no one really talks about what they make, and it's very tough to gauge, so you really have to get a feel for the job that you're doing, the artist, can they afford to pay you more or not? And I think we've all done, like I've taken tours where I took a pay cut just because I wanted to do the tour and I knew it was going to be a great tour, but I knew that I was still in line with what everyone else was making. I wasn't undercutting anybody. It was just something that couldn't quite pay my rate, but it was going to be a fun gig. And I think other things though to be aware of, your travel, make sure you take care of who's taking care of your travel to and from the tour. They're usually they pay to get you to the first show and to get you home, but days off, you are kind of on your own. You get to the hotel and you want to go out for dinner, you want to go somewhere, your travel on days off is on you, as well as your meals on days off, but you should otherwise be getting a per diem every day. What other things can you guys think of for negotiating?
No, I think
I think
Anna covered it, and you also, I think that was pretty much, to me anyways, that's pretty much it in a nutshell,
I think the other thing that's important is if you find out during a tour that you have undercut yourself, you can't react badly to it. You're stuck with it, and don't, because some people get moody and they're like, well, oh, this guy's getting, like so much more than me, and he can do it, and it's like, whoa, it's like you're the one who accepted that money. You need to roll with it, so that's why it's important to do that, because some people will discuss what they're getting paid and others won't. And usually the ones that won't are the ones that are making more. So it's smart, but, I've seen that happen several times where someone's copped such a bad attitude because they found out they've undervalued themselves. But it's right there, they undervalued themselves, so you've got to be careful, and ask people, what's a fair price? Ask people who do that job. They'll tell you because they do it. They might not tell you once you're out on the tour what they're getting, but they'll tell you in a different environment, what a going wage is, Do a little bit of research.
I think a really useful phrase when you're at the negotiating stage is, if you ask them what they're offering and it's not what you were hoping for, you're well within your rights to say, is there any room for negotiation on that?
Yeah. Tell them what you need.
Yeah, and then and get it, in this business you may be unlikely to get a contract, but get it in writing, put it in an email at the very least, so that you've got it in writing should there be any dispute about it later on.
Heck, you can just send them one saying, had a great meeting, thanks for this, glad we came to these terms, look forward to starting the tour. Then you've got it in writing, you've sent it to them, they haven't responded and said, you're mad, what are you talking about? That means they've agreed.
Exactly.
I think it's important too to make sure you're clear on what their expectations are. If it's your first tour and it's a band in a van, are you just doing sound, or are you doing sound and driving? Are you tour managing, driving, and doing sound? You want to make sure you know exactly what is expected of you, because when you negotiate, if you think, well, I'm just mixing front of house on this tour, and then you get out there, find out you're mixing front of house, monitors from front of house, and doing backline, you would have probably negotiated differently. So in the event that you do something like that, it's always, it's within your rights to make a phone call and say, hey, I thought I was just doing this one gig. Can we renegotiate since my workload is tripled? And then you have a decision to make, either if they say yes or no, what do you do? But like Tana said, once you agree to something, you have to live with it. If it's just for the length of that tour, then renegotiate your next one. But you can't agree to something, get out there and be miserable that you're not happy with what you're getting.
Yeah, so be clear with your job description up front as well, because that will give you more room to negotiate. If you're applying to be the front of house sound person, then negotiating prices, and then you say, give me the full description of what my job pertains to, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, we're going to probably have to have you drive sometimes, or help out with the back line. That usually means it's only you and you're going to be doing it all. So negotiate on that. Knowledge is everything. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
What tools should you carry with you on tour? Melissa, what do you always have in your tool bag?
My Leatherman and a flashlight and a Sharpie and more recently, my readers. So I can see the console. Other than that, I bring my computer. Maybe a hard drive, but the drives for files for consoles. That's like super important to have those. But yeah, that's probably about it.
Claudia, how about you? What do you have with you at all times?
My headphones, tape, and then the same thing, flashlight, Sharpie. I'm big microphone person, so I carry my own microphones. I can't travel without them. I love having my own microphones. For me, that's like that's my those are my ears, and I know exactly how they react and respond, and so it's crucial for me to be able to have that consistency, especially when I'm on a different PA in a different room, in a different situation every single day. At least I have that one constant. That's always, I know exactly the parameters. So for me, microphones is a big deal. So those are things. That's pretty much all I do carry. I'm thinking about what's inside my bag. That's pretty much it. Some adapters for like European and British and all that. But yeah.
I'm sure everyone would love to know what are a couple of your favorite microphones.
Oh, the Sennheiser 8050s are the little condenser. They're super cardioids. I love those microphones. And the Cam
Yeah.
the Neumann Cam 184s are just, you can put them on anything and they sound great. Those are, I live with and DPA. Thank God for DPA. When I'm working with strings and pianos, I don't have to think at all. They just give me exactly what I need to hear. And a lot of these mics, like because I know them so well also, that if I'm doing a festival and I'm not getting a sound check and it's just like line check and go, at least I know where I can start, so I can get my game structure together before I've even started, because I know how these mics are going to react. So for me, that's really most important, because I do have a lot of time where there's no sound check. You just run out there and okay, go, and it's so at least you have a place to begin.
Right.
And on.
Christina, what do you always have with you?
Oh, all of those things, but I also like to have a multimeter too for power, because that can often solve a lot of mysteries in a day with buzzes and whatnot.
Yeah.
I also like to have a little transformer too, just little things to try to get noise out of things, especially with in-ears when you can't hide from any of the noise, just to try to get things as quiet as possible.
Becky, what's in your tool bag?
A multimeter and a sense of humor in far-flung places of the world. Yeah, all of those things, Sharpie, scissors and tape. I do like a nice, neat label. And my in-ears, of course. And I carry a little radio scanner with me wherever I go, because that has got me out of jail on a number of occasions when, the more and more that our radio spectrum is being sold off to mobile companies and what have you. That's really, that saved me on a number of occasions.
Aside from tools, what do you not leave home without? Go ahead, Becky.
Medical kit, a little, first aid kind of. This was a lesson I learned after having to try to explain a urinary tract infection to a Russian chemist. So, now I carry a little bag of, just little first aid things for any minor ailments that are likely to arise. That's kind of a must have. And enough gig clothes, obviously, that I can, get through a few gigs without needing to do laundry. A laundry bag for when you do need to do that. That's handy. And something nice for days off, like some for me non-gig clothes, and maybe just something nice for your hotel room, like a scented candle or something, just to give yourself a little treat, or some bath oils, or just to kind of help you chill out a bit, I find. And my yoga mat, that comes everywhere with me.
Marguerite, what do you not leave home without?
A good pair of shoes, like tennis shoes. I would say show day shoes, and then non-show day shoes, and sunscreen. Yeah. Those are my important things.
Tana, how about you?
I was always pretty basic. It was pretty much whatever was going, that would suit me fine. So, really headphones, obviously your phone, but headphones, and, that was pretty much it, really. As long as I could listen to music and sleep occasionally, I was okay. I never really dressed up on days off because there were never any other women around. So it was kind of a little tricky. I always felt it was a bit strange if I all of a sudden came out, looking like a girl as opposed to, just the tour shirt and jeans and Doc Martens or whatever. So I never really did that, but I would have liked to have. I just didn't think it was a good idea. But yeah, no, I was pretty much just basic.
I have a friend that I've toured with, and she had the most brilliant thing. And she's not like a girly girl, but the first day off, she was wearing a dress. And I looked at her, I'm like, I'm so surprised to see you in a dress. And she was a backline tech. And she said, there's a reason for that. Because whenever you run into band members on a day off, it's always, oh, can you go and get me my amp out of the truck? Or can you go get me this? You in a dress, never mind. Like, that's brilliant.
That's pretty smart. Yeah, I never thought of that.
So we have some really good questions from the viewers. And one is, how do you handle situations where you've got multiple clients, artists, that want to book you on the same day, and then you've got conflicting tours? Like if it's 2 or 3 different clients that you work for regularly and suddenly they all have a show on the same day, how would you handle that?
It's really tricky because someone is going to get their feelings hurt, so I usually just try to go with who asked me first and explain to everyone else that, sorry, this person got to me first, so sorry and can't wait for the next time. But yeah, it's tough. And when tours are overlapping, like something's almost done and someone else is starting up, and trying to navigate that can be, there's really no easy, I haven't found an easy way to do it, but because someone, does get hurt in the end or feel slighted by the no.
Yeah, I think you have to do what's best for you, because that you're not going to get paid if you're not working, So if 3 people come at you and really want you to work with them, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, feel really good about that, but you have to do it in a way where if you feel you have an obligation to someone because of something in the past that maybe they've done for you or something, that can affect your decision. But the main decision really needs to be, what's going to come from this? Am I going to get one show and then I'm back on my own looking for more work? Or is there an upcoming tour that they're saying they want me to do the whole thing, even though it's a month away or something? You've got to look after yourself, because in this industry, people don't pay you to sit at home and wait for them to call you back, So you've got to be practical about it, I think.
So what are some ear training or learning resources that you used in the past to better your mix? How do you get better at mixing? Claudia?
For me, first of all, you've got to really listen to instruments. I mean, I work a lot with acoustic instruments. You got to know what they sound like acoustically, number one. Stick your ear in front of an acoustic bass, put your head underneath a piano, go to a guitar and listen to what it really sounds like. Know what the instruments, and every instrument's different, so you might be dealing with a different instrument every day. Go up there and stick your head up there and listen to it, because that's it, that's the source. So you really want to make sure that you're going to translate and, do justice to that instrument. As far as like ear training, I've sang as a kid. I played instruments as a kid. I think it's really, if you have an opportunity to get with an instrument, genius, you can just play, and just doodle around, but get used to the feel and the sound of what an instrument is a great way to listen and get your ear accustomed to sound. Singing intervals. You don't have to be a great singer, but you could get like a pitch pipe and sing intervals and learn intervals, learn, you know, what a third sounds like or what a fifth sounds like understand what the music is. I think that really, it tunes your ear into the notes. And most important to me by far in doing sound, know your frequencies. Learn your frequencies, understand what note correlates to the frequency, because this is what it is, you know, and music are notes. Notes are frequencies. Know what they are, because if you're getting like a feedback, oh shit, I don't know what that is, I can call to the musician and say, what note was that? And they'll say, oh, it's a B flat. And I can think, okay, so that's like, you know, 200 hertz or something, you know, and boom, I can dial that out, and it's going to help, you know, tighten up your mix. That stuff is so important. I think frequencies, knowing overtones, understanding how resonant frequencies work with instruments is, it's just listening. It's just listening. It's just being focused. It's closing your eyes and listening to music and hearing a spectrum. I listen a lot with my eyes closed, and I'll tell you, everything falls into place when you do that. And that helps your mix a lot too, because you can feel dynamics and feel depth. I think you can't listen enough, and you know, and just stay focused. If it takes, you know, people think it's just, oh, you're doing sound, and it takes energy, it takes focus. You really have to concentrate. People be talking to you during the show. It's like, don't talk to me, I'm listening. You know, to get inside what's happening, what they're giving me. It takes energy. It might be like my time to relax, but this is how I relax. And this is where I get off, is that I can actually zero in and just get myself in the headspace that the musicians are in, hopefully too, so we can all be as one, which is where I live. You know, that's my goal. So I think, but frequency, know your frequencies. You can get a frequency chart. You can download it online. It gives you like it'll give you like the note and the frequency and the octave and what the, you know, it's super important, I think.
Yeah. Melissa, what do you do for, you know, improving your mixing skills and your training?
Yeah, I agree with Claudia, like 100%. Everything that she just said is really listening to the instrument acoustically is so important. I don't know how many times I've had to stand in front of a saxophone and listen to, how's this read? How's this read? You know, really trying to, and it's, yeah, that's so important to know what each instrument sounds like, because even on a different stage every day, it could be the same instrument, but now you're in a different space. So taking the time to just to go up and see what it sounds like on stage is good. Also, there's actually an app called Quiz Tones that I downloaded a few years ago, and I pulled it up today, and it basically teaches you frequencies. But the frequency chart is the other thing that's super important, like the one that Claudia is talking about, where it shows all the frequencies and relates it to the notes, like say on a piano, like all the notes. And so that way you can communicate with the musician, like they're just like, it's this note, get this out. And you're like, whoa, what note is it? And you can directly relate it to a frequency at that point. So there's that. And I also, I actually invested some money into a really, really nice home stereo system where I can listen to high res files at home, like in my downtime, and just pick everything out. And I think it just helps because it gives you it reflects a sound that like I would want to recreate at some point. So I want to be able to hear every single instrument. I want to be able to hear all the frequencies, and I want everything to fit in the space that it's supposed to fit in. So I think just listening to high res audio over a really nice system is also, it's helped me.
Anybody else have any tips for getting better at mixing and ear training? I've actually I created an online course called Listen, which is a guide to EQ and ear training, if anyone's interested in that. Another thing that I've noticed is a lot of people who are starting out have a really hard time learning frequencies because you kind of don't have anything to reference it to. And I find that if you can learn the lingo, like where's muddy, what frequencies are muddy, what frequencies are harsh, what frequencies are honky, that really helps you to learn those frequencies a lot quicker, because you can kind of, you know what honky sounds like. Everybody's gonna got that idea of what honky sounds like or what muddy is. And so sometimes that's a little bit of an easier way to learn frequencies, but just, you know, listening, like you just listen and really listen critically to the instruments, you know, like both of you said, the instrument at the source, you need to know what it sounds like before you mic it, you know, if you're going to make it sound good. So here's another really good question. How do you deal with having to look your artist in the eye after a bad show? So if you have a terrible night, do you initiate and discuss it with them, or do you not acknowledge it at all? You know, when you've got problems during a performance and there's an opportunity to communicate with your artist, do you attempt to redeem yourself with a technical explanation, or do you just converse? How technical do you get? Do you avoid them? What do you do? I think we've all been there when we had a night where things quite didn't go as planned. Anybody want to jump in on that?
I mean,
I feel like if,
go ahead, Christina.
oh, go ahead. I was just say, if I made the mistake that night, I try to immediately go in after the show and talk to them about it and just say, I'm sorry, I messed up and it'll never happen again. You know, they really don't want to hear our technical explanations of things. They want ownership and to hear that it's not going to happen again. If it was just something, you know, technical on stage that could have happened with, you know,
5 things I'm good at, 5 things I'm proud of, and 5 situations where I've really, you know, done a good job. And when you hold those up against the things that are going, oh, I don't know if you're up to this, it kind of redresses the balance a little bit and brings that fear out into the light. And yeah, fear's a bit of a liar.
Yeah, I've had situations where I feel like I'm afraid to do it. But if I push myself and do it, I realize, oh wow, that wasn't actually so bad. I actually got through it, and I learned a lot from it, and I conquered like that fear that you're talking about, Becky. I think that's like, I mean, you know, it's hard. I second guess myself. I still second guess myself sometimes, and I always regret second guessing myself. Sometimes early on, there were a couple situations that I was just too afraid to do. And one of them, you know, I regret to this day that I didn't do it. But in retrospect, maybe I wasn't actually ready. I was in my early 20s, and it was a difficult situation dealing with some older jazz musicians with health issues, like with a dialysis machine, going to Central America by myself with them. I was like, I don't think I can handle this. That was just too much for me, you know, being like 23 or 24 years old to take that responsibility. And I knew it. And so I said no. I regret not having been able to do that tour, but in retrospect, I don't know if I think it would have just been super stressful for me. But that being said, it's good to put yourself in challenges. It's good to put yourself in a place at the uncomfort level, because it's easy to stay in your little comfort zone, and that's great. But sometimes it's good to kind of push out of that little comfort zone and try something completely outside, and you realize it's actually not so bad, and might actually be something that you'll be able to apply to in the future, you know.
Yeah, if you know deep down that you've got the skills that are required for, and you're not being asked to do something that you're totally incapable of, then yeah, a little bit of challenge helps you grow, for sure.
I've spent most of my career being thrown in the deep end, you know. It's like, oh, you know, just get it, you know. And it was like, oh, okay, you know. And it's like, and I was driven by a fear of failing. I wouldn't let myself fail. So no matter what got thrown at me, it was like, if they can think of it, then I must be able to do it. And that drove me. It's not a comfortable place to be necessarily, but you know, you learn a lot from it, you know, and you get tough from it, and you get a really great set of survival skills in the industry from it, you know, no matter what department you're in. So, you know, as long as, you know, like Becky says, as long as you're not setting yourself up to be dangerous, because you don't know what you're doing and it could become dangerous. But if it's a challenge and something that you know someone's throwing at you, then it's an opportunity as well. So you know, I think that's important as well, because that also gets you over the feeling of, you know, am I worthy, so to speak, you know, which we all suffer from, or I definitely suffer from. So you know, I would just run and jump. You know, that was it, you know, and just keep going until I had it figured out, you know, and you learn so much that way.
Anybody else?
I was just gonna say, I'm scared every day. To this day, with people I've worked with for 10 plus years, I don't think there's not a day that goes by that I don't have some sort of fear in me, but I think that's what makes you better, right? You just you keep pushing, you want to be better. And yeah, I think that fear is good. As long as you're safe. As long as you're safe. Yeah.
So is it
I've never regretted.
Go ahead. Go ahead,
I
Christina.
was going to say, I've never regretted, you know, doing something that I was afraid of doing. You know, after the fact, I've always been really happy that, you know, I pushed through and did, you know, took on those challenges. So I don't think any of us ever regret doing those things.
Is it ever too late to start, you know, in live sound? You know, if someone was, say, in their 30s and they wanted to get into live sound and touring, is that too late? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, I didn't become interested in audio because I first went to school for environmental science. And so I didn't make the switch until I was 25. And so my first tour, I was probably 29 or 30 when that started. So I was definitely later to the game than most of my coworkers were. So
it could probably be an advantage as well. You know, you're more prepared to, you know, listen and take direction and stuff probably, you know, when you're in your 30s and when you're in your late teens or whatever. So, I mean, I think you are a little bit behind the 8 ball, but as long as you're prepared to learn and again, listen and take direction, which some people might find more difficult as they get older because they think they know better, you know. So it depends on the individual, I think, you know, what they're prepared to. If they seriously want to learn and they want to catch up with people, you know, of their age, then I don't see any problem with it.
And if you were, like, I know some of you have children, so Karrie, Melissa, right? Is it possible to have a happy family life and tour? I think you guys can answer that.
You want me to answer? Is Karrie gonna answer?
Yeah, I'll answer. Yeah, it just is another layer of hard work. You gotta be organized, gotta have a big support group at home. And like we just did a seminar on Saturday on other moms in audio, and you know, everybody had the same problems, whether they were on the road or they were working in post-production, of just the weird schedules, and when you are working, it being kind of 24 hours. So everybody agreed, having really great caretakers, nannies to help with the kids and the crazy schedules, and someone that the kids trust and feel comfortable with. But yeah, you can make it work.
Yeah, I think Karrie and our kids are about the same age, so it was hard. I think it was harder for me leaving them consistently than it was, you know, for them, because I made sure that there was a really good support system around them, and that they had a lot of different people taking care of them throughout the time that I was gone, that it almost made them better people, that I wasn't there. It wasn't just me by myself, or me and my ex-husband, or, you know, taking care of them. So they had the opportunity to be around a lot of different people because of my career.
Right. So is there a limit to how long you can tour? I think it's more a question of what's the exit strategy, because we've all been touring forever and ever, it seems. And how do you pace yourself on tour, and how do you pace yourself just with touring in life so that you don't burn out on it?
Seems like the exit strategy is being given to us right now in this pandemic.
Yeah, that's COVID.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, I'm like, this is the break.
I'm retired right now.
Should I answer that because I'm old? I can tell you what it's like. You know, I think it's down to evolving again throughout your career. You know, I didn't plan anything, for God's sake, but I automatically evolved. You know, so I was always one to jump to something different and to try and learn something different and do that. So, you know, whether it was running a non-profit where we put music in the schools, that was one of the earlier adaptations when I stopped touring, you know, after I stopped doing logistics and all that sort of stuff. So that was something that was pretty much the groundwork for, you know, Save the Music. It was that exact format. So that was interesting, and that evolved into like a huge thing for about a decade. I mean, I was no longer involved in it. But then, you know, I found myself writing, you know, so because we've all had such interesting and complicated lives that it's something that people are interested in, you know. So I started writing and got a publishing deal. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways you can go, and I don't think you can even guess where you're going to end up, you know, because you probably couldn't have guessed half your journey, you know.
Yeah.
Becky, you probably got some good advice for pacing yourself on tour with yoga, and what else do you do to keep healthy and pace yourself?
For me, the number one kind of principle is do something today that the me of tomorrow will thank me for. So whether that's steering clear of getting too stuck into the wine after the show, or, you know, I try and make sure I get some daylight every day, because it's easy to spend most of our time in darkness if we're on the road. You know, if we're not doing summer shows, if you're on an arena tour or theatres or clubs or whatever. So I try and get out for a walk in daylight every day. That's really important, just for mental health. And I try and eat as well as I can. If you know, catering is going to be a bit of a hit and miss situation, I try and have a stash in my bag of some healthy snacks and things like that. And you know, I use yoga to keep my body feeling comfortable, and also to manage stress is a huge one. It's really looking after your mental health on the road is always a good use of time. So I make time for myself every morning to do, even if I don't have a lot of time, just a few minutes of yoga or meditation and getting out in daylight makes a massive difference to my headspace.
Anybody else have some good tips for staying healthy and pacing yourself?
Yeah, I just try to take advantage of where I'm at in the world, you know, try to get out, soak in the surroundings, because that's a big part of, I think, why we do what we do too, is, you know, seeing the world. So I'll try to book a horseback riding trip or something on a day off, and, you know, just spa days are great too. So, you know, just try to get out and enjoy my surroundings as much as possible really helps me.
So what are some things musicians can do to make your job easier? It's a good question from the audience.
Stay home. Only kidding.
To communicate with the musician, I mean, you know, you're working for musicians. This is what we do. We wouldn't be there without them. So if they know you're there, there's got to be a good trust. And I think that's really it, is that if you trust one another and you can talk to each other as human beings, you know, a lot of stuff can get put out of the way. And you know, sometimes it's hard for musicians to articulate in audio language if something's weird sonically. And so you have to be able to somehow be able to decipher what they're trying to explain. But I think that if they understand that you're trying to understand them and you're doing the best you can to make it as good as possible for them, um, it's a two-way street. You're helping each other out. And I think musicians, I mean, we talk music all the time. It's all about and listen to music. We're always talking about music and listening to music when we're driving in a van or we're sitting backstage or whatever it is. Um, I always feel like the musician, the artist, I don't know. I mean, I don't do these big giant tours, but I'm very close with all the musicians I work with. So I'm able to have direct contact with them constantly. I don't know if you're on a big tour where don't see the artist until they're just on stage and then they leave and you don't see them again till the next day or something. But for me, I think that being able to have a relationship with the people you're working with is really important. Um, and I think musicians, I mean, they're listening too, right? So they can come to you and say, man, I think that you need to listen to this. I had a situation where Lou Reed came out to the audience and sat with me and said, hey, have you been listening? Do you hear the keyboard? I think maybe you need to bring the keyboard up a little bit. I was like, I was thinking about some other stuff, and it was like, he totally brought that to light. And I appreciate that he could come out and do that with me and sit with me you know, and listen to and care about what I was doing. I think that was huge. I was like, oh wow, right. He just, I think we're all people. I think we should all be able to talk to one another like normal people, personally.
I always found you got a better working relationship with a musician if you have like something in common that you talk about. Like I would always talk to people about stuff that wasn't necessarily music related, like there was a keyboard player in the band and he'd always do the Sunday Times crossword. So we used to do that thing, you know what I mean? And there was a drummer who was crazy about polo ponies and I used to play polo cross. So, we talk about that sort of stuff and you find that they will gravitate to you on the professional side if they have an understanding of you on the personal side with something mutual like that. That's just how I found it. So that to me was a way that, when we were then discussing about the actual job at hand, whether it was a problem or whether it was something that we just wanted to change and try, there was just a different level of understanding. It was a more relaxed, I don't know, it just made it easier to communicate right across the board if there was like an easy conversation had been had in the past. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, a bond.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, the trust and the communication is critical, I think. And
It is. 'Cause, I mean, they rely on us. They rely on us as much as,
We
in
rely.
a different situation, as they rely on their families. We get that close. You spend 18 months flying around the world with a bunch of people in a bus. You get so close that quite often they'll tell you stuff they don't tell their families, and you've got to be careful how you handle that information, but yeah, I mean, you build amazing bonds, and they last forever, I mean, you see a musician you haven't toured with for 20 years, and I would never go up and say hello. I'd be like, oh, Christ, I haven't seen that person for 20 years. And they come running across the room. Hi, how are you? And it's like, oh, well, that's nice, because they have that ease where they know you're not going to be asking them for something or wanting something, and if they need something, they can come to you, and you won't, react badly or something. You'll understand. I think that's the other part of the job. I mean, that sort of relationship with the artists is really important, and it keeps you going. I mean, why else do you want to stay up 20 hours a day, and pummel your body, every day and get up again and do it again? You do it for them, really.
yeah.
Online.
So during this unprecedented time of COVID, what are some skills outside of audio that would be helpful for someone to develop while waiting for touring to start up again? Example, like getting a CDL or some experience in lighting, photography. Anybody have any suggestions? Learning how to type?
Yeah.
I think as much as you can do, whatever. I mean, we're lucky. If you look at it on the positive side, we've got this immense amount of time we've been handed. Don't waste it. Learn something from it. Like put your skills to the test. There's tons of free courses online,
Yeah.
just even within the music industry, but also ones that, whether you want to go over to like the AV side or just extensions of, whether it's, you know, even the film side. You want to check out some of some of the options and courses they've got going, just to broaden your knowledge. You know, I mean, I'm working on putting together an actual real virtual reality concert, so we can continue to work, so we can do a production, so audiences can see a band on stage with a full production, with a full crew, without touring, you know, without having to go out and put their health at risk, you know, through virtual reality headsets. And it's a lot of work, but I can't stand the thought of listening to a band on a car radio in a parking lot, you know, or seeing them with these patchwork things they're throwing up online and calling it a live show. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not. So that's what I'm doing. My drive is to reinvent the wheel in a way, so we can all keep working. Because once those shows start, everyone can start working again, you know, in the interim, and then they'll follow over. But I think outside of the box is the point I'm trying to make. You know, you'd be surprised. You can come up with amazing concepts.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, you can pretty much find a webinar or a YouTube training course on anything right now. I mean, first thing I did when I got home was I took SMART's online training, because I've never had the time to actually go and get certified in SMART. So it's something I've always wanted to learn, and it was great to have the time to do that. But I think it's more important to, whatever you want to do, make sure it's something that you're going to enjoy, because there's no point in going and getting training in something that you're not going to like just for the sake of learning something new. But there's so much out there, and Sound Girls website has, Karrie, I think there's a ton of resources on what kind of webinars and online training is going on a regular basis. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, or you could just take up an instrument.
Good point. Yeah. You can even do that online these days. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You could play the recorder. You could play, you know, the harmonica. It doesn't really, just play something, you know, and have fun with it. And you'll be surprised also what that'll, you know, keep your head sort of inside music a little bit, you know.
I mean, they've also just come out with CDC guidelines in Europe. I don't know if anyone's seen that, for when we start doing shows again. I see that that's going to venture to a point where the crew people that are going to get the first gigs are going to be the ones that are trained and certified in that. So, I mean, I think that would be something as well, if a certification program was set up, so that you understand what the guidelines are for COVID. You know, when we're coming back to doing, you know, live shows.
Right.
If you have that training and a certificate, you will get hired first. No matter what, you'll get hired first, because they'll have to do it, because the government will be involved. You know, so, you know, someone should set up a training program now. So it's in place for when they finally decide what the rules are going to be and the guidelines are going to be, and then people can start getting certified, you know, because then once you're certified, you're good to go. Because if all of a sudden they say, okay, we're going to try it, we're going to start doing shows, but you know, you all need to get trained, then that's going to be a huge delay. But if you're already trained, then I think that's going to be like a jump start, and you're going to need a jump start, because everybody's going to be wanting to work at once, and it's not going to work that way.
Right.
So things like that, just think outside the box. Where is this all going? What can I do to preempt it? You know, I think it's important.
So we're coming up on our 2-hour mark here, and I want to ask one last question for everybody. What would really have helped you to know when you were first getting started working in the industry? If there was a good, you know, a handful of pieces of advice that you could give yourself back when you were first trying to get started, what would that be? How about Melissa?
That would be to know that COVID-19 was going to happen, so I could have prepared ahead of time. In my mind, I never thought the music industry would ever be affected by anything. I'm just like, my gig is solid, right? So I guess it just goes to show. But like, seriously, I don't know. I looked at that question a lot, and I wasn't sure how to answer it, because I never really had any expectations. I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And then it stopped being a lifestyle for me and kind of turned into a career. And so it was, if somebody would have told me that I would be doing what I'm doing today, I probably wouldn't have believed them. But it just like, I think you get involved in what you're doing as you go, and you kind of forget that's what you were trying to do in the first place.
How about you, Marguerite? What advice would you have given yourself back when you were getting started?
Well, probably on my first tour, which I was on with you, is I need luggage with wheels because I did not have luggage with wheels on my first tour. And it was really hard. After 2 days, I went and got a luggage piece with wheels. No, seriously, you know what? I don't know, because I would say that everything that I've learned in the years have made me stronger and better, and that fear has kept me going. So I don't know. I was just happy to get hired. To this day, I'm happy to get hired. I'm happy to get a phone call, an inquiry, like any of those things, you know? So I just feel very lucky to be in this business. And again, like as Melissa said, if someone had told me that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I'd laugh in their face. I don't know. There's no advice I could really say other than, you know, just to keep trucking along, doing it, be better.
Becky, how about you? What do you wish you would have known, or what would have helped to know when you first got started?
I kind of feel like I learned everything that I needed to know as it went along at the appropriate time. I guess just that I was going to have the time of my life, really, and that on those in the darker moments when, you know, things were really tough and I was really, really tired, that, you know, just keep going, and you're going to meet some of the best friends you'll ever meet. You're going to have some really great times, some really great connections, and there's really nothing like working in something that genuinely brings your soul alive every day, even on the long days. If you truly love what you do, you're never really working.
Good point. How about you, Claudia?
I think for me, trusting my instincts, not being second guessed. Even to this day, I get second guessed by other engineers when I show up at a venue sometimes. And I've learned to trust my instincts and believe in what I think is the right way to do what I'm doing. That's been always hard for me, is being able to feel that confidence that I've got this. I know what I'm doing. And in the beginning was especially hard. And I think if you can just stand firm to your belief of what you're doing, and that you know that you're doing it the way you want it to be done, not let somebody else influence you. That I think my job early on would have been a lot easier if I wasn't so influenced by what other people thought, you know? Trust myself and not allowed to be second guessed. Definitely, I wish I had been more on top of that earlier on. Now I feel good about it, but it took me many years to kind of overcome that. I think really what's most important is that we all have fun while we're doing it, and try to just make it as much fun as possible, because it is a grueling job, you know. Our lifestyle is not easy. It's not normal, that's for sure. Normal people don't do what we do, you know, the hours that we spend and the dedication we have to make a show happen. It's not normal, you know. Get on a plane and you've traveled for, 10 hours and go straight to a show, and, I mean, it's intense. So you got to really love it and have fun. And I think that's really important too.
Christina, how about you?
Yeah, mine's very much in line with Claudia's, just having that confidence that, only comes with time. But, I was so happy when I got my first gig to be where I was, and I couldn't believe it was finally there, that I definitely wanted to make sure that I wasn't rocking the boat, and I kind of wasn't asking questions when I probably should have about certain things, but in time, go ask those questions, and be as confident as you can, because it's those instincts that are within you that will get you through this and and on to your next tour. But it's definitely worth all the hard work, and it's so much fun. So I can't wait to get back to it.
Same here. Tana, how about you? Some words of wisdom.
If I'd known when they said, come on, it'll be fun, that they were kidding. No, I think what it is it molds your life, it molds your personality, it makes you incredibly strong and resilient. And, I think if you can survive in this industry and do a good job, then you can survive anywhere and do a good job. And that's something that people forget. They think they can only do this job. But if you can survive in this industry, you can do any job you put your mind to, which is something that people need to be aware of. I think with this COVID-19 going on, that it doesn't matter that this is the only job you've ever had, because it's so many different jobs all tied into one. Use those skills. I mean, we have amazing skill sets. Anyone who's successful in this industry has just a deep, deep chest full of amazing skill sets. Use them. Don't be scared to adapt them. Just use them, and you'll be happy. You'll be really happy. But it's something that I'm glad I did. And it's a lifestyle, and it becomes a big family. So it's really important, I think the unity is very important. So enjoy.
Karrie, do you want to add anything?
I think maybe people overlook the importance of taking advantage of their days off. They stay up too late, drink too much, sleep all day, just fine sometimes. But I always try to remind myself that, people save money their whole lives to go do a 2-week trip in Europe. And that's the only travel that they've ever done or will do. And every day we end up in these amazing cities, and to take advantage of them.
Yeah, all good points.
Enjoy.
I think for me, the one thing that I wish I had learned much faster was the importance of networking, just for the sake of finding my next gig. When I got my first tour, I thought, okay, great. And I was on a festival tour where there was so many other production managers and crew, and I just kind of stayed to myself and stayed out of the way. And when that tour ended, I realized the only people I really knew were the other people on my crew that were all out of work as well. And I was kind of like starting all over. So I learned a hard and fast rule about, make sure you network and start making connections, because that's where the jobs come from. But yeah, it's been a great ride. And I think we're about out of time. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and those of you who stuck with us. And thank you, Claudia, Christina, Melissa, Tana, Marguerite, Becky, Karrie. Thank you for being so generous with your time and knowledge.
Thank you.
And for everyone watching, if you would like to know more about anybody on this panel, their fabulous stories are all in the Soundgirls profiles at soundgirls.org. So you can read about their path, how they got to where they are, and all the other amazing, incredible things that they've done that we really didn't have time to get into. But thank you so much for doing this, everyone. And for those of you that I just met, it was really, really fantastic meeting you and hearing everybody's stories and wisdom. And love you all.
Thanks for putting
Yeah,
on.
thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.